Okay, so we're gonna get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I am super excited about this Jolt Talk. This is like the end of the year. I was literally about to say it's the morning. I feel like I'm going crazy just because, this year has been madness. But I'm really excited about tonight's talk because we get to hear from our members what they think about the election, the historic voter turnout in Texas, the Latinx voter turnout, and what's next in Texas for 2021. So, before I introduce our panelists, I just want to say that these members have been on the ground. They've really helped push our work. We wouldn't be successful if it wasn't for them. And so I am, like I said a million times already, I'm super grateful to have them on here to just listen to them and to hear what they have to say. They're really driving the work on the ground for Texas. And so I am going to let them introduce themselves and then we'll start a discussion. Giselle, do you want to go?
I'll go. Hi, my name is Giselle, and I'm a Arriba Las Mujeres Jolt fella. And I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be involved with Jolt and be a part of the amazing work that's happening here on the ground. Anyone else wants to go?
Elena, do you want to go?
Yeah, for sure. Hello, my name is Elena. I grew up in the RGV. I'm currently at UT Dallas, and I got involved with Jolt through the UTD organization.
Hi, my name is Ysatis Gonzalez, and I'm part of one of the student chapters, and I go to U of H, and really excited to be here.
Yay. So I know we started a little early. So while we're waiting until 6 o'clock, I just wanted to ask you guys, since this week is a big holiday in America, it's Thanksgiving. And I know this holiday it also, historically have done a lot of harm to Native Americans here in the United States. And we recognize that, but also, we've been through a pandemic and we typically get together, and just celebrate our thankfulness, but then also remember our past and especially like our people's past. So I don't know if you guys want to go around and say what you're going to do this week or one fun traditional thing, because I know like my family, we're not going to get together just because of the pandemic, but so we're going to eat separately. We're actually going to do like some kind of food swap, which is I guess it's going to be okay, but we're healthy. And so that's all, that's the best thing. So I don't know, Giselle, if you want to say something.
I definitely love the idea of a food swap. That's not something that I thought of. Usually my family and my extended family and I get together and I can't tell you, I can count on one hand the amount of times that hasn't happened. I know one year we had like almost 40 people in my house. And this year it's definitely not going to be the same. I actually tested positive for COVID-19 the latter part of not last week, but the week prior. So it'll just be my immediate family and I of my household, and we'll be celebrating a brief Thanksgiving, given that I'm Mexican American, but my parents are born and raised both in Mexico, and it's not necessarily something that we're used to doing. But we definitely see it as an excuse to get together and just talk about what we're thankful for and celebrating the people that we have around us, and acknowledging that the holiday comes from a place where it harmed others, and really acknowledging our privilege to be able to get together like that.
Definitely. And we're so grateful that you're okay. You, like many, unfortunately, a lot of people in this country, been affected by COVID, where none of us are immune from it. And so I'm happy that you're okay and that you're here with us. Elena, do you want to?
Yeah, usually In the past, our families get-togethers are more intimate. It's only my immediate family for the most part. This year, because I'm at school, I'm on campus right now, and it's finals season, so I'll be doing a lot more studying. I have been doing my best to kind of learn my mom's recipes. So on Thanksgiving, I'm going to be on a Zoom call with my mom, and she's going to teach me how to do albondigas, caldo con albondigas, so like soup and meatballs with rice. Yes. So I'm really excited about that. I'm not the best cook at all, so it's been a really great experience throughout quarantine to be able to connect more with her and learn how to make some of her recipes so I can have that in the future.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. I like pretend to cook while my mom's being the real cook. I like just steal everything and eat it quickly. But Ysatis, do you have any traditions or what are you doing?
Well, my family, it's just my mom, me, and my brother this year. And that usually is every year. Sometimes my stepdad will join us, but this year I think we're just gonna stay at home and maybe watch a movie on Netflix, cook some dinner, just keep it really low key. And it's actually funny that Elena mentioned albondigas because that's actually what we're making tonight. So that's like my favorite thing.
That's funny. And yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm always down to like chill and watch Netflix. But anyways, so we're gonna get started on the real conversation that we're having tonight. As I said, we all know election year, pandemic year, which we didn't know that this was gonna happen, like literally living through a pandemic. And I know that the last presidential election year, it was, high stress, high intensity. But, leading up to the election, starting from January 2020, how did you guys feel? Were you guys stressed? Were you anxious? And then I think we could probably answer that in two parts, right? From before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. I mean, I know that for me it was stressful, but like Giselle, like how did you handle it?
Yeah, that's definitely two different sets of emotions prior to the pandemic, how I felt about the election, and during the pandemic. I wanted to say post, but that's not the case still. But prior to the pandemic, I was really optimistic. I had a specific candidate that I was really spending a lot of my energy to campaign for and advocate for in my community. I traditionally do things like go to restaurants or go to bars and walk around with a stack of voter registration cards. And so before the primaries, I got to do that for a little bit, and I got to register some people to vote. While being out and about. I'm based out of Houston, so it's really easy to come in contact with someone and have a really great conversation. And so that wasn't really an issue. But before the pandemic, for that reason, I felt very optimistic. I felt that I felt confident in possibly seeing realistic change. While the pandemic was happening, my feelings did change. I definitely felt more anxious. I almost felt a little hopeless because I wasn't able to really mobilize my efforts how I was used to doing so. Like I couldn't go to a restaurant and I couldn't have an organic conversation with someone and invite them to register to vote. So instead, what I did is I just kind of did it through social media. But again, same feeling of hopelessness because I didn't have that face-to-face conversation, and I didn't know what was working or what was.
Elena, do you want to go next?
Yes, for sure. I remember before the pandemic, in February, I actually attended 2 different conferences, one in Washington and one in Houston, one that Jolt had. And it really empowered me. I was ready to go back and be like, we're going to start registering voters. We're going to be out on the streets doing like the census block walks. And 2 weeks later, everything shut down. So it was a very 180 of a turn, where from optimistic, like Giselle said, to just trying to figure out what to do. I am a dreamer or a DACA student. So having to have the emotions of the Supreme Court rulings and the different kind of media perceptions of who I am and who I'm supposed to be was kind of also, I had to take into account while trying to balance my work and my school. So it was a little less optimistic as the year as like the weeks went on. It feels like years, I do have to say, but as the time went on, it started getting a little bit more worrisome on my end, just because everybody was at home, not everybody was getting like the registered or the information that they needed. But over time, I realized all the different organizations that were really switched to the online platform, and how that really impacted the increase and everything, like all the progress that they've done with the election. So it was really it was scary, but it was also very optimistic how the quick transition to the online platforms was made.
Ysatis?
Um, I had pretty much the same feelings that everyone else had. I know prior to the pandemic, I went to that same Movimiento 2020 presidential town hall, and I was feeling, again, just pumped, just like Elena had said. And I just, again, Jolt at UH specifically had just gotten approved to be in an organization on campus. So we were ready to start rolling out and really doing as much as we could on campus as an organization. And then obviously spring break happened and the pandemic happened, and it just felt like everything kind of stalled in terms of like being able to do voter registration or working with the census. And so I think coming up towards November, when the election actually happened, I did feel a sense of panic, because it felt like we could only do so little. And while we did try to move more towards a social media aspect when it came to publicizing a lot of things, there is that lost, I guess, impact when it comes to face-to-face interactions.
Yeah, definitely. And like what I just like want to add real quickly is, in March, when we had, were sheltered in place, quote unquote, right? But when we were, what we were doing now, right? Quarantine. We at Jolt like knew that you guys were going to be key, just like talking to your friends and your families about voting. And you guys did just that. And we wouldn't have the success that we had this year without you guys just making it normal to talk about voter registration or to talk about voting or civic engagement. And you guys were really, really key to that. And so like, I know that you guys all kind of had the same similar theme of you were optimistic, and then the not the doubt, but almost like the like the panicness of, right, because we're not out there talking to people, like Giselle, like you said, like you would go to bars and register people here in Houston, and we didn't have that face-to-face contact. But I really think here in Texas we had historic voter registration, and we added about 1.5 million new voters, and that was because you guys just talk to people and just talk to your family and just talk to your friends. And we don't have online voter registration, but we broke the 1992 voter turnout this election. And I think and I don't think, I know it's in part because of you guys. And 60% of registered voters went to the ballot box and they voted, and 47% of those voted during early voting. And I know you guys remember the early lines. Like Texas was literally leading the nation in early voting turnout. And I don't know about you guys, but I was like I was shook. I was shook. Honestly, I never thought, like, I live right next to a voting location. I never thought I would see a line wrapped around the corner. But that's attributed to you guys. But I want to know, like, did you guys, like, were you shocked at the early voting turnout? Were you shocked at the voter turnout? And how well do you think Texas performed in terms of just turning out new voters? And Giselle, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. So as being a Texan, I was pleasantly surprised how record breaking our voter turnout was. I also live fairly close to a polling location, and I'm used to seeing some lines here and there, but I was shocked and very happily shocked to see tons and tons of cars parked outside that voting location, and it would make me very, very happy. But I was still a little weary. I had a still a sense of helplessness, and in terms of feeling like I didn't do enough. And so when those numbers were finally released, I was very pleasantly surprised, especially in my county. I was very happy with the results in my county and the amount of voters and within the younger demographic, because it's consistently seen that those specific voters are the ones that don't vote, that the older generations do. And this is just my opinion, but civic engagement should be most important to the younger generation, since they're going to be the longest lasting.
Yeah, definitely. Elena, do you want to add to that?
For sure. I think I had similar reactions to it. I was hopeful, but I was also, at least on my end, I felt kind of blind to what was going to happen, mainly because it was so difficult to see the impact until it actually happened. There was no way to predict, like, these many people were able to do it, at least on my end, because I wasn't able to see it in person. But I think I remember during early voting, how Texas went to the first or second in voter turnout, despite it being, I think, 50 in the last presidential election. And I remember telling my sisters and going on, because I'm really the only political one in my family, or the one that's the most civically engaged. So they heard me rant for a good 20 minutes on on how excited I was that we're getting the representation of more Texans. Oh my goodness, my cat really likes coming during Zoom calls, but yes.
Ysatis?
I was actually very, very surprised at the amount of voter turnout that we saw. There was, I mean, I early voted, and that's something that I normally do. But I know that there were a lot of people, even at my work or on social media, even, that were saying that they were going out to vote, and that sometimes it was even their first time voting, or that that they didn't vote in the last election, but that they were voting in this one. And so I know here in Harris County, we had like record breaking numbers, which you don't see because, again, to most people, they feel like sometimes voting doesn't have very much sway, I guess, because of the Electoral College. And I mean, in this election, people really changed their minds, and they were making an effort to go out to vote or to mail in their ballots. And I just think that that's crazy, especially in the midst of a pandemic, that all these people felt like this election was necessary to vote in.
Yeah, definitely. And with the phone banking and the social media and the just talking to people, like really just talking to your friends and your family, like that really, we've had and just like in Jolt alone and our members, we've had people whose family members just voted for the first time because we've had a conversation with them. But Texas was never a red state. It was just it's a non-voting state. And like you guys all touched, like civic engagement is so important. And getting and I think it was Giselle, I'm sorry if it was someone else, but you guys were talking about youth voter turnout. Like people always love to say young people don't go vote, and then 600% of young voter turnout went up by 600%. And they love to also say Latinos don't vote, right? And that went up 72% nationally. Like that, that is something that is very historical. And I think it's also very shocking in the midst of a pandemic, but also, we're definitely the ones investing in our own community. You guys are investing in yourselves and in the people around you. And that's key, right? Because we often don't see others nationally reaching out to us or even statewide, right? And so, I wanted to go ahead and go into youth voter turnout and Latino voter turnout. You know, like I said, systematic, like they always love to say that young people don't turn out, Latinos don't turn out. You know, when you guys hear that, how does that make you feel? But also, what did you say to your friends and your family or someone who you know who was like kind of hesitant about voting for the first time, or just like voting in general, who always said, you know, like my vote doesn't matter? Like, what do you guys typically say to them? And like how do you get them to want to vote? And then also, again, like I said, what do you guys think about when people say young people and Latinx people don't vote? Giselle, do you want to kick it off?
So whenever I hear that the Latinx population doesn't vote or young people don't vote, I like to say that I'm proof of that. I voted in every election that I could have possibly been a part of since I turned 18. So when I turned 18, I unfortunately missed that presidential election, but there was the midterms and any local election after that. I've been able proudly to be able to be a part of it. And I I hear that from time to time, and then I also hear that people think that their vote doesn't count, or they don't want to be civically engaged because they feel like the issues that matter to them are not paid attention to, or their voice isn't heard. But we clearly saw in this election that every single vote matters. There were so many counties, there were so many states that both Joe Biden and Trump were so close in margins, and you know those few votes made a difference. They flipped the state, or they flipped the county, or they flipped multiple counties that eventually flipped the entire state. I personally have a few people in my life that voted for the first time this year. I have a cousin who turned 18 in February, and I was kind of surprised by her civic engagement. She registered to be a poll worker during the primaries, and she's not the type to be civically engaged, or she didn't strike me as the type to be civically engaged, and she did it on by her own volition. She also took place in helping other people to vote. I would see her post things on social media, reminders. I personally like to do that, and I've been doing that the entire time. And I also have a very close friend that has heard me and has listened to all my rants about public policy, and that he's listened to them. But I would just kind of be speaking to a wall, and he would agree to everything I had to say, but he would just be like, I'm just not, I'm not motivated enough. I just don't feel like it actually matters. And I think in that situation, I led by example. He saw the amount of time I spend reminding other people to vote, or just attempting to get someone to register to vote. And I finally broke him down, and this was the year that he decided to vote. And I think that just like consistent of reminders that I had with him, and I put on social media, and all the conversations that I had finally wore him down. And I do know that he voted based on policy, based on like Trump's policies. He was not in favor of them, and I think he felt ultimately fed up, and that's what was the driving force for him. But I was happy to see one day that I got a text message like, "Hey, I have some questions about voting." And like, how do I find out if I'm registered? Where do I go? And can I go with you to the polls? And I of course, was so happy to get that message. And he and I went. We made it a thing, and he, another close friend of ours, and myself went, and it was just a really, really great experience. So when I have those conversations, or I come across someone that isn't necessarily ready to vote, and I hear that they think that their voice doesn't matter, they're not heard, I like to ask why. Like, why do they feel that way? And in those situations, I think education is the most important thing that you can provide to that person. But in that way, you empower them with the information, and ultimately they'll feel that they're ready to vote whenever they are.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, our community deserves consistency and investment. And, you know, just by you talking to your cousin and continuously talking to your cousin, I mean, you turned him out to vote. And so, like, you should be really proud of that. But Elena, I know, you know, you said you're a DACA recipient and you can't vote, but what do you tell people, or like how do you, you know, your voice is just as important as ours. You know, you are just as civically engaged as all of us, whether you can vote or not, because you literally drive that change to get people to the polls. What do you tell them? And you know, how do you feel about when they say young people or that Latinx people don't vote?
I feel like now, especially, we don't have to tell them as often because we can just point to the numbers. I know that wasn't usually the case in the past, but whenever I hear that, at least to myself, I usually think you have the privilege and you have the duty to kind of make your voice heard and to make that change, whether it be through voting, which you should also always vote, or and as well as other types of civic engagement. Like that's something that people can take for granted. As someone who isn't able to vote, I see that as a sort of privilege that not everybody has, and not everybody has that kind of voice that they can go ahead and say. On my end, even though I couldn't vote, what I did was I educated myself on voter registration, how to do that. So whenever people had questions, they could come to me. Even though I couldn't do it, I can provide the information that they needed to figure out how to vote here in Dallas or in the RGV, and how to go ahead and make sure that they qualified for either voter registration, or to some of them had to do absentee ballots or mail-in votes. So I did the best on my end, but it's how I see it, it's really a privilege to be able to vote and to make your voices heard. And that should be something that it doesn't take too long to do. And it's something that can drastically change not only the state, but the country. So it's worth the investment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, voting is a privilege. And you know, just you like empowering, and like not even you're powerful, so I don't even want to use empowering, but just you like taking it upon yourself to like learn about voter registration and like answering those questions and like being that resource for people. That's amazing. And you know, I think, you know, being a BDVR, but also being knowledgeable about being a BDVR, even if you can't be one, is really something that like you are literally registering someone to vote and then that person's voting, and that's amazing. But Ysatis, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, actually. So I definitely agree with Elena about that we should be voting for the people who can't vote. I think that there's so many other people who make up the US and they're not given the privilege to vote. And so when people just blatantly don't vote because they feel like they don't have a voice or that it doesn't make a difference, it's kind of like a slap to the face to those people who almost wish that they could, because we make the choices for these people who can't vote. I also just think, if like, to say that Latinos don't vote, well, if you look at the numbers, we may be a smaller amount of voters, but we are out there voting. I mean, if you look, you can see that Latina women vote way more than male counterparts. And that's just, again, if you say that we don't vote, like you're ignoring the facts. And for youth not to vote, I think it's not necessarily that maybe they're not voting, but that maybe they're not being reached out to, which is why, again, like I'm so happy to be a part of Jolt, because they focus on youth and Latino turnout. And I think that that is really some of the reason why we saw so much turnout in this election, because there are so many other nonprofits as well as Jolt focusing on the youth and giving them, I guess, the resources that they need to be prepared to go vote. And also, I think there were a lot more accommodations in this election. We were able to vote at, specifically in Harris County, we were able to vote at different polling places, not necessarily where you had to normally vote. And that opens up a lot of opportunities. There was more room for early voting. And I think that that makes a lot of the difference. Texas tends to suppress a lot of things, and that limits the amount of people who can vote.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you brought up Latinx women, because we do vote more than our male counterparts, and that is definitely a topic that we're going to talk about later, because um, we're so powerful, and we're decision makers, both at home and nationally, and so that's something that definitely should be praised. And then we got to get our we got to get our male counterparts to vote. But one thing that I wanted to really talk about is civic engagement. All of you brought it up, the importance of being knowledgeable, but also knowing about other races. Like, I think a lot of people got excited because it's a general election, it's a presidential election, but voting down the ballot is so important, and knowing what those positions are, who's running, no matter what party, like what does that person stand for, what will that person do in this office, because really, they're not our boss, we're theirs. We put them in office, we should hold them accountable even after the election. We saw some states, we saw some counties in Texas. We should have states, right, because we're so huge. But but definitely we saw some counties flip blue to red and red to blue. But I think really what and then in the Texas House, they could have flipped 9 seats, but then that ended up not happening. And I think one of the big things that I wanted to touch on tonight is the presidential election is really important, but down the ballot is just as important, all the way to your local judges, your mayor, and there were some mayoral races in different counties in Texas. There were some local elections that are just as important as that. But I wanted to ask you guys, do you think like that voter education and civic engagement before election is important, and you and like a lot of times, like when it's a voting year, we see it like 3 months before the election, or we see it like 6 months before the election, but it should be going on 24/7, 365. What do you guys think about, like, ways that we can not think about ways, but what do you guys think about voter education and civic engagement? And do you think that's what happened down the ballot? Because I know a lot of people, like for example, I've been told, like, by a lot of people that they just voted for the presidential election and then they didn't care down the ballot, or they didn't vote down the ballot. And I think that's a really big problem, not just for the Latinx community, but for America and Texas in general. And so I just wanted to get y'all guys' take on that. And Giselle, do you want to kick it off?
Absolutely, yeah. Uh, I I I think it's almost like a slap in the face to your vote, and to you specifically, if you just pick the first few candidates and say, okay, that's it, I'm submitting my ballot. Why would you deny yourself of the opportunity to vote for your local leaders, the leaders that are most important to you and that directly impact you, the leaders that you can drive down the street and speak with their offices and really let them know what matters are of importance to you. So I do know that it's a common practice for a lot of people to not go completely down the ballot, and it's definitely an individual's responsibility to look into who's in your community and who's running in your community and what stances are they running on, and what are they going to do to benefit you, or maybe not benefit you. And so it's definitely important to figure out who it is that's running at a local level, and that tends to be the most important election sometimes. And and civic engagement should be all every day, all day, all 365 days of the year, and not just when the presidential elections come around, and midterms, and the smaller elections as well. Who's going to be your county clerk, who's going to be your mayor, and who's going to represent you at all aspects of government.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times that our state leaders, or even our local leaders, they make it really hard to find that knowledge. It's not always easy to find who's running and who's not, And, you know, a lot of times, you know, we're, you know, working class families, people work all the time, go to school. We don't have that much, you know, we don't have that much time to invest into looking at who's running and what they're running for. But, you know, I think, you know, that's a societal change that we need to make. But Elena, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely do think it is a societal change. I remember after the election, I had some friends tell me like, oh, I voted all blue. I don't even know some of them, or I voted down the line just based on party. And something that I kind of really want to encourage amongst them is to take the time to kind of see who the policies, not again with the mayors, with different parties and different candidates, but also with judges, and just try to determine which one has the policies and the alignments that you most adhere to, not necessarily go based off of party, because sometimes that's not always representative of what you want. So I just want to make sure that as a society, I feel it's important to make that change of putting in that extra a few minutes to try to research what you can. It is sometimes very hard to get the information, but research what you can about the candidates to try to make the most informed choice that you can make.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we see some people who've been in office for like 20 plus years and haven't done anything. And it's because, you know, a lot of people, and like admittedly, when I was younger, I used to just vote straight party, or I would just vote for them because of their party. And I didn't take the time to look at what they stood for. Have they made any changes? Especially during a primary, right? Like that's important. Like those are members in their own party running against them for a reason. But Ysatis, do you have anything else to add?
Yes. So I think it's funny that we talk about like voting down the ballot, because this year they actually took that voting all blue or all red off of the ballot. And so you had to go one by one and pick who you were voting for. And I think that was something that was new for everyone. I had people, some of my coworkers telling me like, oh, like that was so dumb that they did that. And I was like, well, it makes sense, because we're blindly voting for these people and they're making it into office and we don't even know what policies they stand on. And whether you're a Republican or a Democratic voter, you should know who you're voting into office, because even if they're a Democrat or a Republican, they have different policies within the party and what they vote for and what they stand on, and differing levels of how I guess conservative or liberal that they are. And I think also like we take for granted these local elections, and we're all about the presidential election and the midterms, but the people who we vote for at the local level are really going to be the people who impact us the most. Again, you vote for people in your county, and those are the people who are making decisions for you at the most effective to you. They're going to hit you before the presidential election is going to hit you. And that isn't to take away from the significance of the presidential election, but we should be focusing more on these smaller elections and on these people who have smaller positions, because they make a lot of the decisions. I mean, if you look at some of those smaller decisions, they make the decisions on the economy or on climate, and that impacts us.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you know, climate is a really big issue, and there's a lot of stakeholders in it that people aren't aware of, like the Texas Railroad Commission. You know, just being knowledgeable about that, and you know, but I think it all goes hand in hand with what you guys said. Is it has to be a societal investment in civic engagement, and you know, like most of the time our state's leaders or the people in office, they don't want us to know because they want us to keep voting them in. And so, you know, that's why it's really important to vote during primaries, because during primaries, you get to pick someone from either party. Doesn't matter which one you're voting for. You know, you pick either you're voting in the Republican or you're voting in the Democratic primary. But there have people in like in each of those, like, let's say like state senator, like, you know, there's a runoff. They stand for different things. They don't stand for the same thing. They wouldn't be running if they stood for the same thing, you know? So I think that's really important. I love that you guys touched on that and that you guys find that important too, because you know, and I think that's something that with that just like voter registration, I think that's something that just starts conversationally, is starting to make those important in our household. And I know that you guys do that, and that's like really important to us. So kind of like switching gears back to not the national, but like just the general election in general. We so during early voting, everybody, like all these news stations were like, wow, Texas actually votes. Look at these look at these lines. Like these Texans are actually out here. They're not all Republicans. Like they're actually, they actually care. Whatever little stigma that they love to say about Texans. But then they turned us into a battleground state, right? Quote unquote battleground state. And so that was kind of shocking. I honestly, like, I didn't think it would happen this soon, that the national media, or like even the national like stage, would tell us, hey, like, you're like, we should have invested in y'all because you guys are turning out to vote. I wanted to know if that shocked you guys, and are you guys excited about the future of Texas politics, and what do you want people to know about Texas? And Giselle, you want to go?
Well, I definitely want the rest of the world, and especially the United States, to know that we're not necessarily a red state. We might be a hue between red and blue. I've heard for many years that we're a purple state, and we definitely have the data to prove it. We have big counties that maintain their status as blue, or that they flipped over to blue. And I'm fairly optimistic about Texas politics. I was a little disappointed and specifically here in Harris County, some of the Democratic candidates didn't necessarily appeal to the Latinx community. I saw a lot of Republican candidates that were having a lot of ads and a lot of airtime, specifically on the radio. And I heard tons and tons of commercials that involved Dan Crenshaw and how he was specifically appealing to my family's community. And if someone didn't take the time to educate themselves on the candidates that were running, he could have easily won that vote. And I think that we're consistently forgotten how powerful we are and how much change we can produce. We're such a big state and we have so many electoral votes. And so to think that we are not capable of affecting such a big election or to harness so much change is shameful to think, because we have so much power within Texas.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I think people just count us out because we weren't voting, or like you said, they weren't making the investment in our community. And now that we're here literally doing the groundwork to make sure people get civically engaged, I think that's why people are so shook because they counted us out, right? And we're like, no, we're part of this. Like, to me, every state should be a battleground state. It shouldn't just be the ones that are all that they'll invest millions of dollars. And I think either party, it doesn't matter, red, blue, independent, you should want to invest in all of our votes, especially Latinx votes. I mean, we're 40% of the state already. We're going to be the majority of the state. Not coming here and not talking and try to really, not necessarily sway, but invest in our community is a huge mistake on both parties' part. But also, just the stigma of us not voting, or of us like putting us to the side. Like, I'm finally so happy, like, and I kind of feel vindicated, that we're like, we deserve this respect and we deserve to be on this national platform. And that as goes Texas, Texas, the nation will go as goes Texas. And we have 38 electoral votes. We still have this electoral system. Like, we're really important. And so why not invest in us? But Elena, do you want to go?
For sure. I was really excited to be part of this, not only demographic shift, but political shift here in Texas, to kind of show the country that our votes and the electoral votes of Texas aren't guaranteed. And whether they have been in the past, they won't be in the future. And I think it was an important call for us to have made as a state, and it's something that's, I hope, is really going to shift the way candidates reach out to the youth and to the Latinx community here in Texas. I think I'm really just excited to have also the undocumented community and all kinds of different communities, people who can't vote because of age, also make their voices heard and kind of do their own part to kind of ensure that the people have the most information they can, and to not only about voter registration, but about the candidates as
well. Yeah, definitely. I mean, not investing in talking into our immigrant community, our undocumented community, is a huge mistake, because you guys put in the legwork. You guys are just as important as us, to invest in, as to people who are privileged to vote, like hearing, and making policy and finding importance in people who cannot vote in this country is crucial. And so, I think now we'll see it. I think now people are they're not sitting so comfortably in their chairs, because they know we're coming and we're voting. But Ysatis, do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Giselle and Elena on their points. And I hate to say it, but again, Texas is a voter suppression state. It's not that, again, people aren't voting. It's that either we can't find the time to do it, or we're not given the resources to do it, because there's limited education on it. They make it seem so much harder than it is. And I can see how it can be daunting to people who have never voted before or who are new. And again, Texas, it's not a red state. And I hate that people say like, oh, like they take us for granted, because people who tend to vote red come out a little bit more than people who don't. And again, we saw it in the midterms, we saw it in this election, but Texas is on the teeter-totter of turning blue. And I think that that's amazing, because it's showing that they're becoming more invested, and they want to see some change, and they want to make their voice heard. They're realizing the power of their vote. And again, it's really amazing to see that they're investing in us. There's so many young Latinx people who are turning 18, not just this year, but in the upcoming years. And so I'm really excited to see how those numbers play out, because I know that people who are our age and younger care about politics. This is something that they want to see change for, because they're not happy with the way things are going.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna skip a little on the agenda, because I love this conversation, and I think this just goes hand in hand of like what literally we're saying is, after the election, we kind of saw like this blame, or kind of like this just like stereotypical like Latino vote, which like it made no sense to me, right? Like watching the TV and like just watching and like listening to like news anchors and like political analysts who like don't even look like us, and they're like talking about us like we're just like one people, like that we are not all different and come from different places and have different color skin and just have different life experiences in general. And it was kind of like infuriating, but also it's kind of a little shocking for me too, because I didn't think that we would get placed like such blame on us, even though we had this historic voter turnout. And especially in like, Giselle touched on this, Ysatis, you touched on this, Elena, you touched on this, like not trying to get into party politics or anything like that, but neither party really invested in us. It was literally us investing in ourselves, getting our people out there to make sure that no matter what party, like that they know that we're important, and that their policies reflect what we believe and what is best in our interest. And so I wanted to like get y'all's guys' take on that. Like when people try to put us in one category and fit us in one box, how does that make you feel? And what do you want our Latinx community to take away from this election, but also to take away, but also like what do you want to tell them? Giselle, do you want to go?
I want to tell my community that it's important to use your voice. That Ysatis said this earlier, that Texas is a state that suppresses the vote, and it's consistently happening. So it's important for you to make sure that your voice is heard, and to voice your opinion for those that don't have the ability to do so. your ability to vote is a privilege, and for you not to use it, it's just kind of disrespectful to those that don't have the ability to do so. And so I want to tell the community that they're important, that they can affect change, that their voice is supremely important, and to vote for those who can't.
Yeah, definitely. Elena, you want to go?
Yes, I remember hearing some like political podcast on kind of how they thought the Latino, the Latinx vote would be. And I remember thinking like we're totally different from the Cubanos and the Hispanics in Florida. We're completely different from the ones in Arizona and the ones in California and the ones scattered all across the nation. So to kind of see that and me being in my head like I told you so, but not really, it was kind of just, I think, necessary for them to really understand that we're not all the same. We're different. Not only within our like demographics, but also within our generations. I feel like how invested you are in certain cultures or in certain kind of environments and lifestyles can really determine kind of more of where your political alignments are, more so than your ethnicity. And I think that's kind of important for the candidates and for us to really understand, to really get the most out of our investments and kind of understand how we vote. Even though we're not one, we are a whole lot of different kinds of people from all kinds of life.
Yeah, and I think like our differences is what makes us so powerful, and like what, people literally should be investing in. We're not the same, right? Are the Latinos in Florida and the Latinos in Arizona and the Latinos in Wisconsin? Literally, there's Latinos in Wisconsin to be turning out historic voter turnout. We're not the same. We don't, we don't have the same experiences. We are different. And I think, and I was happy to see some, Latinx political analysts kind of go on there and be like, and kind of set them straight and be like, hey, why do you think we're the same? Like, why are you trying to put class blame on us when you don't even invest in us? And so like, and it's just something that is important and that we need to keep this conversation going. Ysatis, you want to add anything?
I completely agree with Elena on this one. I think every Latino has a different experience. And again, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of ignorance when it comes to people assuming that people who are Latino are Mexican. And they don't take into consideration people who are Cuban, the people who are Venezuelan. And again, we all have different things that we care about. A policy that may matter to me may not necessarily be the same policy that's of importance to Giselle or to Elena or to you, Gabrielle. And I think that they just take us for granted. They assume that we're going to vote one way because of our backgrounds, and that's not at all how it is. I feel like they need to work a little bit for our vote, and I see that they realize that now because they see that there's a lot of, again, investment in us. But it is a little frustrating when people assume that we're the reason why things aren't turning out the way that they should, because we are coming out in significant numbers no matter how we vote. And I think that people need to realize that, because again, they're just assuming that we're going to go one way, which isn't necessarily the case because of our experiences and because of our backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely. They love to call us a sleeping giant, but we're never asleep. You just never wanted to talk to us. And so another thing that you guys touched on earlier that I kind of want to circle back to is Latinx women. So this year is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which granted white women the right to vote, right? Because brown and black women didn't get it till way later. But it's kind of ironic and very, very fitting that black and brown women really drove out in historic numbers. And so, Latinas, like you said, Ysatis, vote more than their male counterparts. We make up a huge portion of the Texas economy and the U.S. economy, actually. And we're really leading the way in our community and in our country. And so our vote should weigh heavily, people, candidates and parties, they should really want to invest in us, and to not only invest in us, but also that we're reflected in their party, and that we're reflected in their leadership, and and appointments, and that it's not just oh, we want your vote here, but then we don't see them on their staff, this. There has to be a total investment in Latinx women. How does it feel to how does it feel to you guys to know that we vote more than our male counterparts, but also that we are like the leading way in Texas and in the United States? Giselle?
It doesn't surprise me that women are I guess the battleground demographic, and we're natural born leaders in the family. Traditionally we're bred, so to speak, to lead the way. So it doesn't surprise me at all that Latinas, Hispanic women, or like Black and brown women are the ones that are really pushing those numbers and flipping those counties. I think it might surprise some, because it goes back to the ignorance that we just spoke about, how a lot of our communities are assumed to be very similar, and how just like one would assume that all Democrats vote the same or all Republicans vote the same. And so it doesn't serve as a surprise to me. And I I think like you said earlier, like we weren't sleeping, just no one was paying attention to us.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, we are born leaders. We're taught that at a very young age, but also like our grandmothers and our mothers, just leadership, and it's bred into us. And that's what makes us so powerful. But Elena, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of more conflicting feelings, because I've always known that, of just growing up with powerful women as role models in my household, in the school, but then having on the national platform be like, oh, they're there. And it's like, yeah, I've known this the entire time. So kind of having it translated to the national stage was a part that I was like, how did you not know that we were this powerful? So it's something that I really hope is it resonates with the nation, and I really hope they take it into account when they try to do that in outreach. Like, we're an essential part of the community and of the votes. So you guys should be investing not in Latinx, in women, in so many different communities that have often gone not reached to the extent that they should have.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely see, a lot of Latinx women, we know what it's like to be outcasted or to felt like left behind. And that's why we're such leaders in our community, especially with LGBTQA rights and immigrant rights and disability rights, is because we lead the way, and we understand, and we definitely make that we have those people in our community, and that are Latinx, and we know how important that is. And I definitely think like what you said, Elena, like that we've always known that, and I feel like they didn't know that until AOC came out and just was her authentic self, and they're like, oh my gosh, like these Latinx women are so powerful, and it's like, yeah, we know that. But Ysatis, you want to go?
I totally agree with you, Gabrielle. I think it's awesome that we have these like empowered, beautiful, like strong Black and brown women in Congress and in local politics. And again, like it's crazy because they paint us out to be like just people who don't care, or who don't have a lot of say in things. And we're out here organizing, we're out here voting, we're informing people. We're doing more sometimes than I hate to say it, our white counterparts, than our male counterparts. And we always get painted out to be like as aggressive or as loud or as, I don't know, like crazy when we speak up or when we try to be passionate about something. And they try to silence us, and we're just doing what we're good at. And that's, again, bringing people together and making our voices heard and trying to organize things. And so it just makes me feel really proud to see, especially in this election, that we voted not only a lot of the same Black and brown women, but even more. And I hope that it just continues to grow, because we should be represented in our community, because we're making so much more of a difference than some other people.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of senators and leaders and people know, especially like white older men, they know that Black and brown women are very powerful, and I think that scares them because they know we're natural born leaders, and that we take our whole community with us and to vote. And I think that's what shakes them and makes them sleep, makes them get angry, or like you said, like painting us as crazy. They try to do that all the time because they don't want people to actually hear what we have to say, because they know once they do, it's over for them. But yeah, that's really important. And I kind of want to go a little bit back to election day, just to touch up, because I know, in 2016 we knew late at night, that Trump was going to be president. And I don't know about you guys, like just like having it drag on into the weekend, like, the election day was on Tuesday and we literally didn't know to Saturday. I think just like, having a little bit of a reminder of like, and like we're still seeing, like we're not done with counting. Like we see these, we see, the president over and over again recount, and recount. But I just wanted to know, like, how did you guys feel on election day and then the days like leading up to when we actually knew? And were you happy to see like that states like took the time to count each vote, and to make sure that like absentee votes and that everything was counted before they made their final call? Like, how did you guys feel about that? And Giselle?
I was very pleased to see that it took some time to call some states and some counties, because to me it's very, very important. The reason why I choose to be civically engaged is to empower everyone with the education, or teach them, or remind them about their ability to vote, the privilege that they have to vote. And going back to what I mentioned earlier about hearing people think that their vote doesn't matter. They took the time, they're still taking the time to make sure that every single vote gets counted, because every single vote matters. And so to me, it really pleases me that the election is still being counted, and that the mail-in ballots, the ballots from people that live overseas, or maybe someone that just didn't feel safe enough to leave their home, or an individual that's taking care of their loved one that can't leave their home to go vote. So it really pleases me to see that every vote is being counted, because every vote matters.
Yeah, definitely. I think, a lot of times, in our society, we live in like we have things instantly. And I think voting is not one of those things, right? Like it shouldn't be one of those things, because we have so many votes, and then people literally still vote by paper ballot. Like you can't count all those ballots in one night. But Elena, do you have anything to add?
For sure, yes. I understood the frustration, because I was like, I can get Amazon packages faster than this. But I also understood why it was necessary, especially right now, the efforts that these states made in order to ensure that the voters could vote safely from their own homes during a global pandemic. It's not something that was national, it was something that affected the entire world. And for them to have taken those extra precautions and to count a little bit longer, a little bit more, in order to ensure that these individuals that could vote safely did, was something that really helped me kind of calm down the frustrations that I had. That didn't stop me from refreshing the page every few minutes for 3 days straight, or to listening to political podcasts and just let my mind wander of like horrible things that could happen. But it was really something that I was glad that they took the time to ensure that everyone that could vote, that should vote, could, in a safe manner.
Yeah, definitely touching on like the refreshing. I think like I didn't sleep well like the entire time. Like again, I was just so worried that like in 2016 I woke up in the middle of the night. And I think just like And it kind of was frustrating, right? But at the same time, it's really a good thing that we had people invest in every single vote, because like Giselle said, every single vote matters. Ysatis?
I agree with what the ladies have said. I mean, it's and is with what you said, in the past, I mean, elections are called, I think, really early, and that's been the norm up until this election. And so it was surprising, and I think a little like nerve inducing for a lot of people that this election took so long, because we had so many mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, and that was with even with record breaking numbers of early voting, and then to wait almost a full week to get actual results. And even now they're still counting or recounting a lot of those results, and you see finally that states are putting their final like results in place. It's crazy, because I think we do live in a time, like you said, where we want things instantly, and we're so used to having what we want in that moment. And this is not something that we should rush to have, because it does indicate a lot of how things are going to roll out, and we should take our time and be careful with stuff like this. And I just think that's crazy. I know when I got the election results, I was at work, and I had coworkers come up to me, because they know that I'm that crazy person who is always like, go vote, or like, you should do this. And they were like, oh my gosh, like, did you hear? And I was like, no, like, I don't have my phone on me. And to hear the results, it was kind of crazy, because we just felt like we were never going to get them. And even Saturday, I think that was really soon. There were states calling it way too early for their own states, and then to see that some of the counties who had called it red were now turning blue, and vice versa, is just crazy, because we were counting all of those votes.
Yeah, definitely. So like, everyone's like ready for election breakdown, and like, we actually won't have that final count till February. And so I think like that ties back into civic engagement, right? And understanding that, there are a board of canvassers in each state from each party, that like typically it's two from each party, and they vote to formalize the votes in that state. And so like, I think it goes back to like, that's something that that even I didn't know until I went to college, because it's not taught to us. But we're in November. I'm like trying to think what what year this is, because it's just like I felt like February was like its own year. But anyways, moving on to the future in 2021, I think it's really exciting. We're the Texas legislators coming up. The Texas legislative session, there's going to be a lot of bills on the, bills being trying to pass, but also, we're seeing a lot of COVID cases. We still are affected by COVID. We see in El Paso, the horrible things that are happening, just pop up morgues and people literally dying, and like our state leaders not doing anything about it. We see tons of, I don't know if you guys saw like on Instagram or Twitter, like the food line in Dallas, like, that's just in Dallas. Like it's everywhere here, because people are to work, people are hungry. Texas has the most food insecure children in the nation, and it's a shame, and it's a shame, and it needs to change. And we have the most uninsured people, and people are talking about we're going to go into a budget deficit because of the sales tax, and just a lot of important stuff coming up this Texas legislator that we need to keep fighting about. We need to keep uh, enlightening people on, and making sure that people know what's going on, and who those stakeholders are, and how do they pass and how they pass legislation. But what do you guys think Texas needs to focus on? And I know it doesn't have to be one answer, right? Because like we're literally like 5 million things are going on this month. But Giselle, you want to go?
That's such a loaded question. What does Texas need to focus on? There's so much. Where do I even begin? I think the most obvious is definitely COVID-19. What are we going to do to protect our healthcare workers? What are we going to do to protect our hungry communities? What are we going to do for the people that are going to be evicted or are on the path of getting evicted? I think that Texas really needs to focus on really serving the underserved communities, because we already were aware of the communities that were neglected, but this pandemic really put a magnifying glass and really expedited those problems that they were facing. And so I do think that COVID should be a priority, and serving the underserved communities and communities are consistently forgotten.
Yeah, definitely. Elena?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like Texas really needs to focus on the people of Texas. Just right now, we're seeing just a huge second wave of COVID, and they're still not wanting to put anything in place that puts the people first. They need to focus on, again, like the people, they need to focus on helping them economically, not only for what they've done, for what like the sufferings that they've had in the past during the pandemic, but also the ones that they'll continue to face as more cases arise. I feel like they also need to start making a plan on the distribution of vaccines and of funds once they become available to these people, and to kind of ensure that the underserved communities, that immigrant communities, and that everybody is able to access funds, but also the vaccines when it does become available. I think those are the crucial things that they need to keep in mind for 2021.
Yeah, definitely. Ysatis?
I agree. I think that we need to put some more focus on COVID, not necessarily, again, like the vaccine, but how we deal with the effects that it's brought upon us. I think it showed, just like Giselle said, a lot of the issues that we had within a lot of our systems that we took for granted. I mean, healthcare, obviously that's the biggest thing that COVID brought out all the issues with. We have all of these healthcare workers, or these people who can't afford to get the things that they need checked out. And then again, we bring up like food insecurity and even education. I think there were a lot of loopholes with education that COVID brought out, and it depended on where you stood on the level, I guess, of your class. If you were a little bit wealthier, it may not have been affected as much as if you were more middle class or lower class. And that is sad, because again, these are the kids that they're going to make up our future, and then are going to graduate and become voters or become people within the nation who work. And so I definitely think that we need to figure out how to handle a lot of the effects that COVID has brought upon us.
Yeah, definitely. Like you guys said, those cracks are always there. It's just highlighting them and highlighting what we need to fix as a state, and what we need to address as a state. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel ready to go for 2021 to make sure that our Texas leadership understands what needs to happen. We're coming up to 7:00, and this is the end of our Jolt Talk. But before I let you guys go, I just again, and for you guys listening too, thank you so much for all the work that you've done in 2020. Literally, we would not be where we are if it wasn't for you guys. We wouldn't be a battleground state. People wouldn't be looking at us, and saying, hey, we need to listen to these people in Texas if it wasn't for you guys having the conversations, adjusting yourself in a pandemic, making yourself available, making yourself, really emboldening our community to know that it's powerful. And Joel, and I know all the staff and everyone else, and everyone are so thankful to you guys. And our next Jolt Talk is going to be a little bit of a thank you to each and every one of you. But to Giselle, Ysatis, and Elena, thank you so much for being on here. Each of you are so powerful, and I just I loved hearing what you guys had to say. And I hope that all of you are safe and have a great Thanksgiving. And right before I let everybody go, I do want to invite everyone to our volunteer hours. They happen every Wednesday. You can follow us on Facebook and on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, and we post when we're going to have them. And we're actually going to talk about a donation drive for gifts and to help people who are in need of help, because there's a lot of people who need help this holiday season. So if you want to come volunteer with us, please do. But anyways, that's it. And just thank you guys and have a good night.